leading the NATO troops there at the moment. It will be a big day, though, not just NATO meetings taking place, G7 and a meeting with the European Union as well. But before all that, this NATO meeting, I think we can hear from the Canadian Foreign Minister as she arrived a little earlier on.
Obviously, we condemn such an egregious attack that puts the security and health of civilians at risk, not only in the city but also throughout the region. We condemn this attack, and I'll be having a conversation later this morning with the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency. We take this extremely seriously, and we will raise it this morning at NATO.
Well, she, alongside her US, her British counterpart, will be part of this European Union Foreign Affairs Council meeting taking place later, as will the Ukrainian Foreign Minister. He'll be appearing via a video link where he'll make a further plea for support when it comes to air defence support as well. So we'll hear that later on today. But Liz Truss making it very clear that sanctions were important, that the unity of the West was important. As she puts it, we need to tighten the vice around Putin's war machine, Jane.
Laura, thanks very much. Well, let's stay with Brussels. I'm joined now by NATO's former head of planning, Fabrice Potier. Good to talk to you today, Fabrice. What are you hoping to get out of and hear out of this extraordinary NATO meeting today?
Well, that hopefully we are no longer one step behind, as we often are with Vladimir Putin. We see things coming, and as everybody said, including President Macron, things are going to get worse and very ugly for the Ukrainian civilian population. And I think it's time to start a serious conversation about how we can better basically deal with that, because for the moment, NATO has been largely focusing on itself.
Do you think NATO's doing enough?
I think it's doing enough for its own members, but I think it's not doing enough, clearly, to stop what is going to probably become very quickly a mass killing.
Our Parliament's Defence Select Committee Chair, Tobias Ellwood, has accused NATO of hiding behind its membership. Do you think that is fair criticism? You know, obviously Ukraine isn't a NATO member, but do you think the invasion is a result of NATO hiding?
I think the invasion is not a result of NATO hiding, but what is now unfolding, I think clearly NATO is not doing enough to contain Vladimir Putin's war and economic machine. For example, NATO could fairly rapidly close access to the Black and to the Baltic Seas, which are actually key areas of operation for Vladimir Putin's navy and for trade. So I think NATO needs to be a bit more creative and not, like Tobias just mentioned, like you just quoted him, not just focusing on itself, but also on a country that fundamentally is a European country and on the war that is happening on European soil.
Is there anything at all that Vladimir Putin could do that you think would lead to NATO sending troops into Ukraine?
Well, I think if we contemplate a likely scenario that the war is quickly going to become a guerrilla warfare, with the Ukrainian forces and population becoming basically insurgent in their own countries, defending every street, every building, these guerrilla warfare will have to be supplied. And the main supply will come from countries like Poland and Slovakia. And you could indeed imagine those countries, which are NATO members, being basically sucked into the conflict. I'm not wishing for that, but all I'm saying is before we come to a miscalculation or a war by fait accompli, we should think a bit more creatively on how we can constrain and signal to Putin that he cannot go on killing Ukrainian civilians unpunished.
So you've talked about things like closing the Black Sea. What else do you think NATO could try to do?
I think, well, NATO or NATO members, I think there are some cyber operations that should be conducted. First, to disrupt the Russian forces operation on the Ukrainian soil, as well as to also go after some Russian critical infrastructure, as they have done in the past themselves in the United States or in Europe. So I think we can do much more on the cyber front. And finally, I think we need to amplify in a much more dramatic way the light but very precise weapon systems that we are delivering to the Ukrainian forces. We need to do much more quickly. And finally, we need to provide more protective gear, more communication gear for the territorial defense force, which basically are civilians turned into soldiers, which allow the regular soldiers to do the fight. So we need to do much more quickly.
Fabrice Pottier, we're going to end it there. Thank you so much, because we're going to take you straight to Brussels.
It's a critical time for our security. Later on today, NATO foreign ministers will meet and coordinate and consult on our response to the brutal Russian invasion of Ukraine and also the longer-term implications. We condemn the attacks on civilians, and over the night we have also seen reports about the attack against the nuclear power plant. This just demonstrates the recklessness of this war and the importance of ending it, and the importance of Russia withdrawing all its troops and engage in good faith in diplomatic efforts. NATO allies have implemented unprecedented sanctions. We provide support to Ukraine.
We see things coming.
At the same time, NATO is not part to the conflict. NATO is a defensive alliance. We don't seek war, conflict with Russia. At the same time, we need to make sure that there is no misunderstanding about our commitment to defend and protect all allies, and therefore we have increased the presence of NATO forces in the eastern part of the alliance. This is a defensive presence, and I welcome the strong commitment from the United States with more troops. I met many of them, and it's always great to meet US troops in Europe and to see their commitment and their professionalism being part of the transatlantic bond. I also welcome that European allies and Canada are stepping up with more presence in the eastern part of the alliance, on land, at sea and in the air. If the crisis we are faced with now demonstrates the importance of North America standing together in strategic solidarity in NATO. So once again, Tony, welcome. It's great to see you here.
NATO's doing enough.
Thank you so much. And I really couldn't
I think it's doing enough for its own members.
But simply put, in the wake of Russia's unprovoked,
clearly to stop
premeditated aggression against Ukraine,
probably
this alliance came together with speed, with unity, with determination, immediately launching the Rapid Response Task Force, putting in place the graduated plans to continue to bolster NATO's security. Every ally, in one way or another, is coming to Ukraine's assistance. Every ally,
Parliament's
in one way or another,
Defence Select
is
Committee
helping
Chair,
to strengthen
Tobias
NATO
Ellwood,
itself. And as the Secretary General said, ours is a defensive alliance. We seek no conflict, but if conflict comes to us, we're ready for it, and we will defend every inch of NATO territory. At the same time, as the Secretary General said,
of hiding behind its membership. Do you think that is fair criticism?
And the events of the last few weeks,
you know, obviously Ukraine isn't a NATO member,
into the NATO summit in a few months, and the writing of a new strategic concept. All of these things are coming together at a critical time. But the single common denominator that we found, and that is the strength of everything that we do, is the unity of this alliance. It's been on full display.
But what is now
these weeks,
unfolding,
it will remain on full display going forward. And I look forward to consulting with you, Jens, about the steps we're going to take next. Thank you. Thank you.
So, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, they're giving some rather general opening remarks ahead of this foreign ministers' extraordinary meeting at NATO in Brussels, talking about the fact that NATO is, of course, a defensive alliance. Blinken describing Russia's attack as unprovoked, premeditated, and Jens Stoltenberg thanking North America for standing by in solidarity while this happens. We'll bring you more updates from those talks as they continue throughout the day. Now, with Russian shells hitting cities across Ukraine
NATO
over the past week, the world has seen photos of women forced to give birth in underground metro stations and other makeshift bomb shelters. Well, let's bring in a couple of people to talk to us about what is happening. The Regional Director for Eastern Europe and Central Asia at the UNFPA, Julia Velez, that is the UN Sexual Health Agency. And I'm also joined by Nadia Danilshina, who is 40 weeks pregnant and has just been evacuated from Kiev. Thank you both so much for joining us. Nadia, let's talk to you first of all. First of all, you're 40 weeks pregnant. How are you? How are you feeling?
Currently, I'm fine, thank you. I'm in a safe place. So, in my native city in West Ukraine, here is a bit calmer than in Kiev, and it's much better place to stay in 40 weeks of pregnant than in bomb shelter. So, I'm blessed. I believe that I'm really blessed. Thank you.
Where do you think you will have your baby?
When I expect to have my baby from day to day.
Whereabouts will you have it, do you hope?
When I believe that maybe in a couple of days I will have a baby. I feel it. So, yeah, very soon.
What about in terms of going to a hospital? Will you be able to go to a hospital where you are?
Yeah. We have like 2 wonderful hospitals. So, and today we are going just to see what conditions they have, because a lot of hospitals work in military state, and usually they have the patient in bomb shelter. So I'm just want to go to check if it's true or not here, because in Kiev usually hospitals work in bomb shelter regime. So it's not a private room at all, as planned before, to give birth. But anyway, it's still under medicine control. It's anyway better than. I'm proud that women that gave a birth in shelter, like directly in shelter, but more safety just to give a birth in hospital. Let's see.
Well, very, very best of luck with that. Julia, let's bring you in. We've all seen the images, and it doesn't bear thinking about, really, if to have to give birth without any kind of medical support, potentially in a really difficult situation. How many women do we think are in a similar situation in Ukraine at the moment?
First of all, I would like, and thank you very much, I would like to express my sympathy to Nadia and wish her really a safe delivery and a healthy baby. I cannot imagine what she's gone through in moving out of Kiev. As you said, women have the right to deliver safely in the best possible condition, accessing life-saving health services free from violence. Our estimate says that there could be up to 80,000 women right now who could deliver any moment, any time, yet they may not have access to life-saving services. As you said, they are delivering in shelters, in metros, underground, while bombs fall on their hospitals and facilities.
And what aid are you able to get through to them?
Well, we are trying our best to bring life-saving reproductive health services. Many facilities are still operating in certain areas of the country, but they might soon run out of supplies. Of course, we need unimpeded access. We need those humanitarian corridors that have been talked about in order to have access to those places that are right now very dangerous, because safety and security, of course, remains our primary concern.
And what about the news that Ukraine may have reached a tentative agreement with Russia about potentially humanitarian corridors for aid? How big a difference could that make?
Well, first of all, we really need the war to stop. We need peace. We need unimpeded access. Of course, humanitarian corridors could help get to those places that need it most. But even the health facilities that are not under shelling may run out of supplies soon, and the needs are massive. So many women are in desperate need of help and support. And that's why it's very important for the conflict to end as soon as possible, so that all the women can deliver safely in the hospitals, in the maternity services that exist and that needs to be restocked and resupplied.
And Nadia, back to you. I mean, most women, when they have a baby, they have a partner with them to help them. They may have decorated a nursery or, you know, even a corner of their bedroom and have an idea of where their baby is going to grow up. Who are you going to have with you, and where are you and your baby going to live when you've given birth?
I will live with my parents in my native city, but also my husband together with me, luckily, and I'm not sure that we'll have a partner and delivery process because hospitals are overwhelmed. So I'm emotionally try to be prepared that I will have like a single labor and delivery process. But anyway, like if I have a husband here together with me, and I'm lucky that he can support me 1 week or 2 weeks after, and then we will decide what to do. I hope that war will end, and I don't know, NATO will support us, and finally they close the sky above the Ukraine, and it will be a bit calmer, and I will able just to stay in Ukraine because my husband wanted to that I moved with our future kid, our future girl in abroad in Poland to my relatives, but I hope that we'll back to Kiev.
Well, I hope so too for you. Nadia, the very best of luck over the next few days. We'll be keeping everything crossed for you. And Julia, thank you so much for joining us as well. A reminder that amongst all of this, normal life is going on for so many people. We've just heard from the German Foreign Minister. Let's listen in to the NATO conference and what she's had to say.
We are standing here in close solidarity between the EU, between G7 and NATO, making clear that this war from President Putin, which is not a war by the Russian people, it's a war from Mr. Putin against the Ukraine, that this war is not only a breach of international law and a breach of civilization, but also is the most dangerous action towards its own country. We are seeing that our sanction packages are already taking place and having big effects also on Russian economy, and today we underline that we are helping all the Ukrainians fleeing, but also Ukrainians in the country with humanitarian relief.
Well, that was Annelies Baerbock, the German Foreign Minister there. Well, figures from the United Nations Refugee Agency show that more than 1 million people have now fled Ukraine, and Poland has taken more now than 620,000 refugees, it is estimated, according to the country's border guards. And the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is going to be travelling here to where we are today, Medicar, and she is going to be meeting some of those refugees. Well, let's now talk to the chair of the Association for Ukrainians in Great Britain, and from their Bolton branch. This is Yaroslaw Timchinchin. Good to talk to you this morning, Yaroslaw. How many Ukrainians do you know in the UK who have considered doing the opposite toward all the refugees we are seeing coming out of Ukraine? How many people do you know who've gone from the UK back into Ukraine to fight?
Actually, I don't know of any, because my generation, we're all in our 60s, and so the thought of actually going to fight, I can't see that happening. No, it's not something that we would think about a great deal, to tell you the truth.
How are you feeling looking at what is happening from such a long way away and from such a position of powerlessness?
Sad, angry, annoyed, frustrated. Those are the same emotions that I had on the 24th of February when we first learned of this invasion. As regards being powerless, I don't think we are that powerless, because as a community, our association is trying to help our fellow Ukrainians in Ukraine by supplying them with medical needs, medical assistance, medicines, food packs, etc. Also, there is the power of contact with the British government, and thankfully, here in Bolton, my local MP, Mark Logan has been very vociferous in his support for us, especially in Parliament, and so I think that really does help.
I mean, in a wider picture, do you think the British government is doing enough?
It could probably do more. There's no doubt about that. Quite satisfied, if that's the right word, with the last round of sanctions, but it could be ramped up. And I've got to say that Boris has gone, for that I'm concerned, by pushing for SWIFT, of the withdrawal of the SWIFT banking system, could do a lot of damage to the Russian economy, which is needed.
There are great concerns about what is happening in terms of the kind of fighting that's happening inside Ukraine. There have been some predictions that perhaps guerrilla warfare could happen. How concerned are you that Ukraine is going to be, well, just decimated by what is happening?
Right. We've been through this before. We've been through this during the Second World War. We were decimated then, and we rose back. And Ukrainians have a history of fighting guerrilla warfare. With the Ukrainian army, which was a resistant army which fought against the Soviet Union during World War II. So we have a history of being guerrilla fighters, and this will be, if it comes to this, then Ukrainians will fight and will fight and fight.
And as for you, what about family? Do you still have any family? Do you still have many friends out in Ukraine? And where are they, and are they safe?
Well, most of my family are in western Ukraine, near Lviv. We're not far from where you are, in Medika. So my cousin lives in a very remote village on the Polish border. So I'm not too concerned about herself. But on my wife's side, most of her family live in and around Lviv, and if the worst comes to the worst, that could be one of the major cities that Putin wants to capture.
Okay. Yaroslav Tymchynchin, really good to talk to you. Thanks so much, and best of luck with all that you're doing, fundraising and helping old friends back in Ukraine. Thanks very much. The NATO foreign ministers meeting is still going on in Brussels. The EU foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell, has just spoken. Let's have a listen.
It has changed a lot since then. We are now witnessing a full-fledged war in our borders, a war unleashed by President Putin against Ukraine, and a completely unjustified war that's creating a lot of civilian casualties, with the use of arms strictly prohibited by the Geneva Convention, a lot of civilian losses. That's the moment to speak out and to stand up. That's the moment where the transatlantic unity is more important than ever. We at the European Union, we have decided an unprecedented package of sanctions, financial, political, economic, sanctions that will hurt the Russian economy a lot. And we are supporting the right of Ukraine to defend, and we really admire the courage of the army, the people, and the government of Ukraine. I think it's important to launch the Moscow mechanism and to send a message, a mission, to see which are the acts that can be considered war crimes. And once and again, I think that's the moment in which we have to be united, because we cannot afford that might makes right. This is a critical moment in the history of Europe.
What do you expect from NATO to do?
A stronger unity and ready to act as much as we can. And the important thing for me is to keep the unity of the European Union member states around the sanctions, which are going to be very damaging for the Russian economy, especially the ones related with the